Boris Johnson is a cult leader.
I don't even want to repeat some of the things he said.
The only reason why I voted for him was because of Brexit.
So now we're making excuses for people who have walked out on their families.
He does not care about ordinary people.
He's had so many parties, there's just a litany of stuff.
Keep bringing up Thatcher, she's dead.
Sorry, hold up.
Welcome to Just Seen A, the viral content show where we get real and discuss the buzzworthy posts you've just seen online. This is the only comment section you can watch in real time. Now, before you continue watching, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's see what happens.
Using 3 words or less, what is your opinion on our current Prime Minister, Boris Johnson? And we'll start with Aaron.
3 words or less. Opinionated, disgraceful, but determined.
I think historically he's shown that he does not care about ordinary people. And when I say that, obviously I'm a black woman. I'm talking from the experience as a black woman. And I care a lot about the black community. And I think there's so much evidence that he does not care. He's privileged, he's entitled, but that is what the political system is like in this country. They're all from Eton, they're all white, male, they do not represent our interests. And I think that with Boris, he's doing what is always done, really.
And even jumping off that point, if we're going to talk prejudice and Boris Johnson, you could almost take a dart and there's no community this man hasn't offended.
Yeah.
Like the amount of, if you go through his catalogue of insults, prejudice things that he said about black people. I don't even want to repeat some of the things he said. Single mothers, working class people, everyone, pretty much every constituency. It's abhorrent, and we've seen what happens with other politicians, Diane Abbott, for example, who have done much less egregious things, sometimes minor mistakes, whatever your viewpoint on it is, and they get lambasted by the media. Boris does countless racist, prejudiced, and all the ists things and just gets on with it. And why? Because this country loves privileged white men.
And even like Corbyn said something about Israel. He was anti-Israel because obviously they're a government and we should be able to criticize them. And he was called anti-Semitic and all sorts. But Boris went and called women wearing a veil letterboxes and nothing happened. And it's like...
He said bank robbers as well, right? That's incredibly offensive. So.
And now we're all in COVID masks, covering our faces.
For me personally, obviously everyone's entitled to their own opinion, and there's a lot of things that's been said that's actually true, but I don't see anything better than what we have right now. If I was in power, or if I had the power to remove Parliament or remove a certain someone from office, I don't know who I'd replace him with. Are you going to give me what, Keir Starmer or Mr. Hindsight? What's that going to do for me?
What do you mean, Mr. Hindsight? At the end of the day, right, Keir Starmer wasn't the one having parties during the pandemic.
At the end of the day, Keir Starmer has not brought a single policy that is independent or valid or that makes sense for any of us. He's flip-flopped on everything. He said, we should open the schools. Then Boris has kept them closed, and then he's been like, we should keep them closed.
But let's focus on Boris Johnson's conduct, right? Because that's what we're actually talking about here, right? Ultimately, this is a man who told people, you cannot see your relatives, only 6 people can be at funerals, right? Who then went to go and have multiple parties in Downing Street. That's not a man that should be Prime Minister. Forget the fact that he got Brexit done. Okay, let's give him a round of applause for that. But ultimately, he's a public servant, right? And he's not serving the people by having parties in Downing Street.
And his right-hand man fell in love and started going, kissing his co-worker and all sorts. A lot of things have happened. So it's funny because they fine students £10,000 for having parties, but they're not getting fined £10,000 for their parties, and them breaking the laws.
And what has happened, just to be frank, has been nothing more than a cover-up, right? You had the Met Police coming out and saying they weren't going to investigate Boris Johnson.
And it's Rishi Sunak's relative that runs the Met Police. So it's that's why they're not even investigating.
I didn't even know that.
Sajid Javid.
Can I just ask though?
Sajid Javid, that's it.
Can I just ask though, what more do you expect from politicians? What do you expect from politicians?
I expect politicians not to have parties.
No. I mean,
they're saying...
You understand the thing that goes, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Boris Johnson is no different from any other politician.
No, but you,
Does
as a
that make
leader,
it
you should.
okay for
It
him?
doesn't make it okay, but I don't know why you think
But no, what you said,
Like,
no. But this is the frustrating thing, right? What people try to do because of Boris Johnson's conduct, they say all politicians are like this. So let's just give him a pass.
No,
Prime Minister,
give him
even
a
wait,
pass.
hold
I
on,
agree that
even
what he done was
hold on. Even Theresa May and David Cameron would not have had parties in Downing Street at the height of a pandemic.
You sure?
Right? Boris Johnson, of course not.
And
No
you know
other
that
British
how?
Prime Minister
I
other than
agree
Boris
with you.
Johnson
No
would break the rules so blatantly, right?
don't
And he
know
did it
that.
with such impunity as well.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I was just saying that if you look at the infighting within the Tory party, they actually want Boris out. So I agree that as a representative, as a public servant, as everyone has said, he literally went against and allowed him to actually bend the rules in that way. On the other hand, though, who are we going to have instead of him? I think someone raised that point, like,
Yeah.
it will be the lesser of two evils in the extent that Keir Starmer...
Well,
There's so many-
Corbyn, whatever
Hell
he
no.
said in his manifesto is actually what would have helped the pandemic.
Yeah.
He did, there's a lot of policies he said, even the current war with Ukraine and Russia, he doesn't want NATO expanded, and that would have avoided it all. So there are better politicians, it's just that people don't want to accept it.
And the thing is as well-
Corbyn is a cult leader, okay?
No, he's not.
I think he's a cult
Wait, hold on.
leader.
And you think? Wait, hold on. Wait. You're calling
I've never met a guy that has such a... I don't know
He's
how
a
to
people
explain
person.
it.
Wait, hold on. You're calling Corbyn a cult leader, but you
But there's
can't see that
Boris
Boris
Johnson.
Johnson is a cult leader. Number one, hold on, wait, number
Does
one.
Boris Johnson have his own fans?
Wait,
Yes.
of course.
Do you wear Boris Johnson hats or something?
We were talking about Jeremy Corbyn and how he would have been a better prime minister, apparently. Corbyn is one of the biggest reasons why Labour are in such a shit show they're in right now.
Okay,
again-
wait, hold
One
on,
of the
hold on.
biggest reasons why.
The question isn't whether or not we want a Labour or Conservative government. It's about Boris Johnson's
And
conduct.
as a leader.
And on
Yes.
his conduct,
It's about him
there
as
are
a
so many other Conservatives that would do a far better job. Not
Name
necessarily
one.
in running
Name
the
one.
country.
Name one.
Name one.
Rishi Sunak.
Do you actually
Are you
believe
sure?
that?
I mean, I think the whole
I'd rather have him.
A billionaire.
The political
Conduct,
system
yes,
as a
he
whole
would.
is a mess. It doesn't necessarily matter who is in government. Like,
So we shouldn't
I
have
agree
the
with
Labour Party and the Conservative Party have issues. And I think we can't ignore with Corbyn, he was able to build a movement of young people who were engaged in politics. Like, so many young people were not interested.
No,
because they just
what he
also funny
did,
as well.
he exploited young people's naivety. Like,
No,
3
but
years
you know what's
to do
so-
that.
Get
20 years from now, who's going to pay for
You know
that?
what's so interesting as well,
You think
right?
free
get
zip Oyster
started,
card is
come
free?
on.
Beep, 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 or no Oyster card machine.
Boris
Think it's
Johnson
free.
said,
It's not free.
Boris Johnson said in an interview once, yeah, that his plan or the way he sort of goes about things is to fill his life with so many gaffes that no one knows which ones to point to. There's so many things we can talk about when it comes to Boris Johnson. Even the level of corruption we've seen during the pandemic with the government contracts just being given out without proper procurement processes.
Yeah.
We could talk about that. We could also talk about the fact he's had so many parties. There's just a litany of
Even-
stuff
even
that
the-
Boris Johnson has messed up on.
Even the track and trace costing, what, 34 billion or whatever it was costing, and they couldn't give families that are desperate for £20 extra a week. He deprived them when he could have put that money towards that. The track and trace has not done nothing to help us.
And free school meals. Like,
Free school meals.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
so
there's
like
the-
Marcus Rashford had to campaign.
Campaign for it. And coming back to Corbyn,
Heck.
what you need to realise is
Yes, like,
80%, maybe even 90% of people are in poverty, severe poverty. If you're going to find someone who's reflective of the people, because democracy is about the people and the government, right? Being people's people. Boris Johnson is definitely not that. Corbyn, whether you like him or not, he's been for 40, 50 years campaigning for people throughout his lifetime. And his...
Sorry, do you say
But Corbyn-
90% of people?
no, but-
You say 90% of
It's in
people are in
severe poverty
poverty.
in the
But
UK.
Corbyn had his
90%.
opportunity to be a leader.
9-0
Yes,
in poverty.
in poverty.
What's the source for that, first of all?
I could give you the sources. I
No,
could give you
that's
the sources.
wild.
I believe that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Fucking
I-
wild.
Just by show of hands, right? Who here would vote for a Tory party?
Reluctantly.
What about a
It
constituent?
depends. It
Reluctantly.
depends.
It's a lesser
It
of two
depends.
evils.
It depends.
Say reluctantly.
It
Say it with your
depends.
chest, man.
No, it
Yeah,
depends
own
who's
it.
in
With
charge.
chest, like,
It depends who's
reluctant.
in charge. It depends who's in charge.
I'm going to ask you again. Yeah, so just who would vote for the Tory party? Just show of hands.
Okay, I've got this tweet here. Don't ever vote Tory Monday motivation. Okay.
Tories are a violent party. Like, they've been
Violent?
attacking the poor for the last 10 years of their
Jeez.
government. We can't
Attacking the
ignore
poor.
that there's
Wait,
increasing
attacking
gap
the
between
poor.
the rich and the poor.
I want to ask this though, but why is it
I
the
mean-
most of the time, most of the working class are more voting for Conservative now than Labour?
Because they are
Exactly.
Thank you.
misled. They are
Why
misled.
is
By
And it's
what?
led
How?
Okay, can I land and then we
Yeah,
can
go on,
discuss
go on.
it, right? What is our biggest issue now, especially our age? How old are you guys?
I'm 26.
I'm
26.
20.
What is the biggest issue? What is the biggest thing we want now?
Don't
A house,
Affordable
right?
housing.
Housing.
Yes. Affordable
Do you know
housing.
who started the housing crisis? It was Thatcher. So now, when we're going back to Conservatives, it was Thatcher that started it. When she started the Help to Buy scheme, and people buying their council properties, they couldn't afford the mortgage rates because it was at 17% or something ridiculous. Families started breaking because they started arguing over money, and then their houses were repossessed. Now house prices have rocketed. We will never buy a property because we can't afford it. We need to have at least 4 people's salaries because the average salary, even for our age, is about £26,000. Yeah. So when we're talking about voting and all of that, Thatcher started it off. Even dependencies on social benefits, welfare, it started with Thatcher because she got rid of the coal mining industry, and all of them people were permanently made ill, and they are the majority that are still on the benefit system. So the social dependency started with Thatcher. It didn't start with Labour. Labour started in the 20s, 30s, and they've had minimum wage. They did unions. They've done so much.
So what was?
Can I jump in?
Just to add on to your point, right? I think ultimately, successive governments have failed to invest in housing, and that has led to the housing crisis we have now, where house prices haven't kept up with wages and stuff, right? But the issue, and I think the reason that it's Monday motivation not to vote for the Tories is because, let's be frank, they're enemies of progress.
Exactly.
And
Who's for us?
Enemies of progress.
No, but
progress?
can I explain why they're enemies of progress? So the fundamental reason why the Tories are, in my opinion, enemies of progress is because ultimately the Conservative Party exists to conserve institutions that have existed for tens of thousands of years.
And why do you want to get rid of them? Why do you want to abolish them?
Wait, hold on. As a Labour Party, we are progressives. We believe that the only way we can change society
is by tearing down statues.
No, it's not by
nothing for anyone.
Why are you interrupting me? You see, this is what Tories do. Like, the one thing the Tories are good at. Hold on. The one thing Tories are good at. The one thing Tories are good at is PR. Literally, that's why you guys were able to convince so many working class people in the north to vote for Boris Johnson.
I'll put my hand up.
The fact of the matter is, Boris Johnson is breaking all of the things he promised to do.
Can I actually respond? Is anyone here actually Northern? Is anyone Northern?
I'm not Northern.
Is anyone?
No, I'm not Northern.
Okay, so you're talking on Northern Tories. I'm Northern.
Okay.
I'm from Newcastle. Okay, so before you start talking on the people that you've never met, have you been up north?
I have been up north.
Okay, have you lived there?
No.
Okay, be quiet then. So on why they have changed from voting from Labour into Conservatives more often than not is because, as I said, as we've talked before, is that these towns and cities are run by Labour mayors, Labour councillors. There's Labour MPs in most of them, especially where I lived in Newcastle. It's all Labour there. It's a full-on. Can I finish? This is what the left do. They just interrupt.
Can you finish the point?
And the point of the matter is that Labour no longer represent people. A lot of people want a change. It's not necessarily that the Conservatives are the best or that they're going to, come around and modify everything, but it's the fact that people are fed up with Labour.
Okay.
And
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
As a northerner who's in the small towns, what does a Conservative government do for you, and what does a Labour government do for you? Like, what is it that people want change in? Because I can give you many laws and things that Labour has introduced that's benefited people, and I can tell you many things that Conservatives have done that have actually hindered people progressing. So what do people want from
before you answer that, right, your point about the fact that there's a lot of Labour mayors in towns and cities and stuff, the UK is one of the most centralised countries in Europe, right? Just because you're a mayor of a particular area doesn't mean you necessarily have the powers to improve your local services like you would. At the end of the day, funding comes from central government. And if central government is depriving areas of money, of course people are going to be suffering.
Yeah.
They're going to blame the quote-unquote people in power.
Yeah.
When David Cameron came in, he implemented a brutal policy of austerity, where he literally cut the services of so many councils, and they weren't able to build houses, they weren't able to provide provisions for children. It's between 2010 and his government ended in 2016 when he subsequently resigned.
Why did he do that?
Why did he do what?
Why did he
do that? It was a choice. Austerity was a choice.
Do you know what it is?
Austerity was a choice.
Do you know?
Did you not finish your point?
Yes, you wanted me to answer So in terms of what people are looking for, so housing is a big one. Starting their own business is another one in terms of, financial independence, and that type of thing. And previously, you know, Labour, like Corbyn, as you mentioned, his sort of policies that he wanted to introduce were just too expensive. And that's the truth of the matter is.
That's fine.
In terms of all the things he put in the manifesto of free this and free that, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have some welfare benefits because, you know, again, working class, I grew up around sort of that type of thing. So I understand. But in terms of like making everything free in the long term, it does not make sense economically for our country.
I've been sitting here quietly stewing because I'm trying to process what I heard earlier about someone who said that the Conservatives are Labour's against progress or something.
Yeah.
This is the thing, yeah. The Conservatives, they're more concerned about the economy, right? And because they believe the idea that pre-enterprise capitalism, selling and buying and stuff like that, improves the individual, improves the person as well. Whereas Labour's supposed to be all about the working class. But you have to ask yourselves, why did Labour find themselves in a position where you have not just one or two swing voters, but entire constituencies voting the other way?
It wasn't the entire. So
It was.
Do you know the voting system, how it works?
Absolutely annihilated.
Do you know what the
2019,
shall I tell you something?
destroyed.
Shall I tell you? Do you know how the voting system works? Do you know the system is first past the post? Do you know how it works? The only reason Labour's lost seats is because Brexit Party was created, and the small minority of Labour supporters that didn't believe Corbyn's Brexit strategy, they voted for the Brexit Party.
Do you know who runs the Brexit Party?
Yeah, Farage, right?
And you're telling me Labour voters went to Farage?
Can I finish? They did for Brexit.
Yeah,
because he said it was for Brexit, right? So them little swing voters, they threw Labour constituencies off by literal small minority, right? Anyway, coming back to coming back to economy, Conservatives under Thatcher went through 2 recessions under Thatcher. New Labour was the one that actually
keep bringing up Thatcher. She's dead.
Sorry, hold up. Because the reason why is because our economy is of what our past governments do.
Yeah.
It takes years for your economy, for laws that come in now, it will be in 20 years, we'll see the impact, right?
So what do you want to see?
It's not what I want. It's the fact that government is all about the people. Democracy is about the people. The majority of the people are working class, right?
Yeah, but
majority of the people are not.
You want, because the
I
want
a
don't
government
vote Tory.
I think my personal policy is that even the worst Labour government is better than the best Conservative.
Thank God.
And I think the reason that is because Conservatives bring with them ideology. And this isn't to differentiate the Conservatives from Labour. I think to an extent, before Corbyn, there was a political consensus, a Westminster consensus where neoliberalism was normal, where the market ideology and the private and things like PFI or the Private Finance Initiative made our NHS and medical system dependent on private contractors, often to the detriment. We've seen what's happened to social care as well, where providers have allowed all kinds of abuses and stuff because it's not nationalized. I feel like there's an extent to which both parties do have similarities. However, with Corbyn, I think it was a breath of fresh air. And I know there's criticisms. In 2019, I was looking at the manifesto a bit like, this is getting longer and longer. I'm not sure about this, but I think that the heart of it is always the prioritization of people, the prioritization of politicians, of Corbyn and his people going down to the actual working class communities and understanding what people, like black and brown people, really think in a way that had never been done before in British history.
And just quickly about the economy, right? Because I hear Tories say this all the time, that Conservatives run the economy way better than the Labour Party, but that's not actually true. If you look at when Labour were in power between 1997 and just before the financial crisis, we saw the biggest increase in long-term. That was the longest period of GDP growth and prosperity in the UK, and also the biggest increase in wages, right? Just between that period, 1997 to 2008, just before the financial crisis. And with Thatcher and with all other Conservative governments, you've actually seen wage stagnation, right? So this idea that Tories come in and cut everything and the economy is all dandy is nonsense. Like, just think about the cost of living. Since the Tories have been in power since 2010, how many more homeless people have you seen on the street? How much more has rent been? How much tighter or worse has your life been when the Tories are in power? So don't let them spin this narrative that when the Conservatives are in power, the economy is booming. The economy is booming for a certain group of people,
Exactly.
but not the majority of people. Not just, and it's not just
Exactly.
working class people that suffer. It's also middle class people that suffer. under
Can I
Conservative
address?
governments.
Can I address what he? Can I address what point he made?
I just want to ask, you said about the increase of homelessness. How much more refugees are coming to this country? More people?
But that has
Oh,
nothing
let's
to do
not
with
even do
homelessness.
that.
but-
Let's not
that
even
has
do that.
nothing to do
And then-
Refugees are not
but then-
the
but then-
problem in this
Why
country.
can't he
Wait, let him
say
finish
what
the
he's
point.
saying?
But then
Okay,
I want to
let-
ask.
Okay.
And
Okay, that's fine, yeah.
But then, like you said, obviously we had this conversation earlier about obviously the period between 1997 to 2008. Cool. What happened after 2008 though?
There was
those 2 years.
There was a housing crisis.
Who
in
was
America.
leader?
There was a housing crisis in America, right? And
Uh-huh.
the American financial system collapsed, and the entirety of the world felt that pinch. And if it wasn't
Because of capitalism.
yeah, exactly. And if it wasn't for the steps that Gordon Brown
And the
took
alliances,
to
yeah.
assemble
Yeah.
the entire, I think the 7 or 8 biggest economies, he assembled them in London, and he decided to inject money into the economy. If it wasn't for the decisions that Gordon Brown took, we would have been in a worse position.
And coming back to your point about refugees, do you know how much the UK have impacts of world wars? They're bombing Somalia, they're bombing so many countries, they're creating the refugees. So if Britons don't want them, don't create them. Even the problems in Ukraine, NATO doesn't have to expand east. Why would Russia want Ukraine to join NATO? That's their back garden.
But it
Why
was the Labour Prime Minister who started the illegal war. So
It's
he's the
also
one who
the
created it.
audacity for
But
Again,
the-
Tony
can I
Blair-
address? Can I address
There's
this
also
point?
the audacity.
Can I address this point?
Let's not talk about
Exactly.
Yeah, can I address this
I'm
point that
sorry,
he's...
like,
Okay, so I got a tweet. The rich should pay more tax.
yes, they should. I mean,
Yeah.
they can
That's the
afford
policy.
it. What's
Wait,
the
How do
issue?
you define the rich?
What is the
though?
issue? Like,
Exactly.
Yeah,
Sorry,
who's the rich?
I just wanted to ask, because there are a lot of well-paid people in the tech industry, which is where I work, and you work as well, right?
Yeah.
The thing is, a lot of those people are from deprived backgrounds or would have grown up with less money, and they might want to buy a house for themselves or their parents. So if we tax them and they're classed as rich, that's getting a little bit difficult.
I think it's the way we tax. So in this country, I think we tax income too severely, and I think there are other ways that people make crazy amounts of money, i.e. through the stock market, through commodities, through investments, and we're not taxing that nearly as much as we tax other things. And also when it comes to businesses as well, you've got like high street retailers competing with big tech giants like Amazon. And Amazon, we all know, aren't paying their fair share of taxes. So maybe we should start taxing those types of corporations and those kinds of people that are making money off other streams instead of middle class and working class.
Can I ask a question? Do you believe that there shouldn't be sort of billionaires then?
Sorry,
Yeah, I
wait,
think
can I
billionaires
just
should be
touch on
taxed
her
out of
point
existence.
quickly?
Why not?
Sorry, can I just touch on your point quickly?
you can't have
I think
billionaires
I
without
think you've
exploitation of ordinary
Would
workers.
define
I think
exploitation.
What is exploitation?
I think you've made an amazing point, because this is why there's certain ethnic minorities that vote Tories, is
Yep.
because when, like for even myself, I'm in a higher tax bracket, which means I pay more tax, which makes me want to not pay so I can save for a house. But the problem is, the reason why house prices are so high is because of the Tories and the lack of social housing and
Yeah.
everything else. So the reason, and the problem is, we will pay our tax because obviously we're working for a company. Companies evade tax immensely.
Yeah.
So, and the Tories, they promote it. Get a good accountant, he'll tell you what to do. They are the ones winning. It's always us losing.
Which
And
policy
the-
is that?
and the
But
thing
it's
is, the
always,
Tories-
it's always
you know
the
what,
white
Which
white
policy?
elitists that are
No,
making...
wait, hold on. Which policy is that?
Sorry?
Which policy is that?
About what?
Promoting tax evasion.
It's the fact that you get yourself a good accountant as a business person, because where we're employed...
Which policy is that?
It's not about policy.
Which
it's
manifesto
business,
was it on?
It's business-minded.
It's about who
It's
calls
about
Hold
saying
on,
who
okay,
promoted
fair-
that.
fair enough.
But
yes,
who
but
promoted that?
one
Okay,
thing that
what
we
is-
need to say,
hold
one
on.
thing that we need to say.
Can we hold on?
Sorry, wait.
Hold on. But
Okay,
like,
as a business person, even myself, I know the little I know about business. You keep costs down, you make big profits. You get your expenses, you show all your legal your expenses as to avoid tax, because obviously if you're not making profit, you're not paying tax, right? You get a good accountant and he can do whatever. A lot of rich are taking their money even out of the state so they can evade tax. It's common knowledge.
Yeah, offshore tax
Offshore,
accounts and stuff.
exactly.
And the
we can't afford
but
that because we're not
the
doing
thing that
that,
we
but
should
it's the
even-
rich
You're not
elite that
affording
will do
that.
The thing that we
You're
should
just a
even
worker,
caveat
but
it,
you're-
right? The one thing we should even caveat is the Tories are no longer the party of low taxes, right? They're increasing national
Exactly.
insurance, even though they promised that they wouldn't. right?
Exactly.
And the thing is,
but then if you
wait,
didn't-
hold on, just
if
really
they
quickly.
didn't, you
Wait,
say
just
that
really
they're not
quickly.
fixing the
Wait,
social, like
okay,
the
wait.
healthcare
Okay, cool.
sector.
I'm gonna answer your question there, right? Because they had a choice. They could have done income tax or they could have done national insurance. National insurance is a regressive tax. It takes more money from poorer people than income tax. So the fact that they chose national insurance over
Exactly.
income tax shows the kinds of people
Exactly.
that they work for at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Why national insurance and not income tax? If it was because they wanted to pay for other things. Why not tax it properly? Why not take it from the people that actually have money?
Exactly.
Why are they taking money from people who are barely staying alive? And at the same time, they're taking £20 a week from people who are struggling.
Can't afford it.
How does that make any
sense? And that's because they've put the cost of living so high.
Someone said about billionaires shouldn't exist. I mean, the same billionaires that we criticise are also the ones that are creating jobs for the economy in the first place. They're the ones that kind of
trickle down economics.
They've also lost jobs. I'm sorry.
Right, this idea, billionaires, I understand that some people, you call it cheat system or whatever, right? The idea that a billionaire can start from scratch and work their way up, you know, the idea that there's like a meritocracy to it where you create jobs and you create this big empire like Amazon, for example. You say Amazon don't pay their fair tax. Can I just ask, how much do you think a fair tax should be on billionaires? Without the billionaires...
Shall I tell you something?
You know the top 1% in this country pay more than 80% of tax?
Okay.
There's something that's true. It is true.
80%, I don't think it's as high as 80%.
It's higher as 80%. So the top 1% are paying 80% of tax. That's not equitable.
I know it's not equitable. I know it's high proportion.
I don't think...
It's not equitable. You're having the top 1% paying 80% of all taxes.
On top of that, 1% have exploited...
So what's wrong with that?
But the 1% have exploited the 99%.
I'm sorry.
Can you define exploitation?
Okay, I'll explain.
Sorry.
Can I explain exploitation?
Can I say something? Because this idea that we should get rid of them and exploitation, these people are creating jobs.
No, it's modern day slavery. It's modern day slavery.
Let me finish. They're creating jobs. Let's say that we ban Amazon. Creating slaves.
They're creating slaves.
Fucking hell, there used to be a time where being a slave was actually being a slave.
No,
people are being paid.
This is modern day
People are
slavery.
being paid for a job.
It's not £50 an hour. People are being
£15 an hour. £15 an hour. That's good money.
You're getting paid £50 an hour.
No, it was saying £15 an hour. That's actually
a warehouse packer. Sorry. Can I just clarify? A warehouse packer gets paid £50 an hour.
15, not 50.
15.
Okay.
Okay.
But the point of the matter is, people are creating jobs, and people are applying for said jobs, and it's a good way to climb up the ladder. You start off somewhere, and then you move somewhere else when you have experience. Move somewhere else when you have experience, and then they make money. So you want this idea where people come?
I'm not sure if you guys should be.
You want this idea that people start off at the bottom and have as much money as those who have worked.
No one's saying that.
Let's talk about rags and riches.
To be honest, everyone, you can't have the super rich without exploiting the working class. Like that relationship, the minimum wage. We saw Molly May with the working 24 hours a day. Let's be honest, we don't all have the same experiences. We don't all have the same access to wealth. White people, because of whiteness, they're going to have a certain relationship and not all of them, obviously, because there is working class white people, but it's easier for certain people depending on your identity. Let's be honest.
No.
Can I just say something? Okay.
I was just going to say, I fully agree with your point when you were saying that innovation creates jobs. As much as I hate Elon Musk, he's obviously created jobs for people. But at the same time, it's still unfair. Even if you're making a decent wage in London, the cost of living is still so high that you'll probably never get on the housing ladder. So that's when it comes even those who are doing well for themselves are suffering. And that's why the issue with the Tories at the moment, I think.
But can I ask you a question? Why do you hate Elon Musk? Why do you hate people who have went out of their way?
I don't
said hate.
Okay, fine. Okay, I
yeah.
said that, but
Why is it that we dislike or hate or it's discouraged? I haven't asked my question yet.
Sorry, I don't.
Why is it that is being discouraged to start somewhere, start a business? Yes, pay people minimum wage. I'm not saying minimum wage is great. I've worked minimum wage jobs, but what is wrong with people doing that and they're making their money? The reason why Amazon, I'm never going to hate on Amazon and be like, oh, blah, blah, it shouldn't exist and all this. I use Amazon all the time.
Okay.
I'll be a hypocrite. If you use Uber Eats, Deliveroo, Pure Gym, Amazon, eBay, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, if you have an iPhone, if you use any of those things, you are engaging in this so-called slavery that you have. Show me what phone you have. Show me the phone that you have and we'll see.
Because capitalism is the fabric of society. That's why.
Just really quickly, right, about your point about Elon Musk and stuff. Ultimately, right, I think we should applaud anyone who has started from the bottom and been able to take themselves to the top, right? And no one's saying that Elon Musk Jeff Bezos shouldn't be able to enjoy their wealth. However, they don't need £1 billion in their bank account. to enjoy
You're paying
Could
for
I
that.
finish? Could I just finish really quickly? And when I talk about taxes, I'm saying that those companies should pay their fair share of taxes.
Exactly.
If I was to start a small business, I don't have access to top quality lawyers and top quality accountants to exploit the tax system.
Work to get there.
Could I land? Google pays a very, very small amount of tax in the UK, and it can do that because it has the lawyers, the money, the connections to do that. No one's saying that Amazon shouldn't exist or be allowed to create jobs and operate, but what I am saying is that they should pay their fair share of tax, just like any other business has to.
Treat their workers.
And coming back to your point,
exactly.
How is £15 an hour not treating your work as well?
If they want to, I guess. That's what I say.
do you think there's a duty on society to do it?
To a certain extent, because
Who's
there's only.
society?
I think
Can we
only to a
define the
certain
question a
extent.
bit more? Sorry.
So, should I be
government.
obligated to give money to the poor, basically, in a sense, or?
Wow, that's very sad.
It doesn't have to be about money as well. It could be about advice. It could be about anything. Like,
Yeah.
when we think about this question, I feel like everyone's going to think about, money, this, that, tax. But no, it should be. It can be interpreted in different ways in terms of, like I said, advice. Like I said, yeah.
I think the problem is with citizenship, a lot of people don't realise when you're a citizen of a country, the state has a duty of care to its citizen. For example, if you're abroad, they have a duty to help you make sure you have a fair trial. There's different countries have different rights, right? So Singapore have their citizens will have certain rights. Saudi Arabia will have certain rights. We as British will have certain rights. We pay our taxes, we're meant to get a service from the government, which is better healthcare systems, housing, all of that. They're meant to take care of us as people in general. When you have people that are disabled, it's a duty on the state to take care of them because they are our citizens. If they're on the street, it should bother us because they are equal to us and they should be equally taken care of. Coming back to businesses, I don't have a problem with people having businesses, but to have businesses, you have to have a roof over your head, you have to have food, you have to not be worried about living paycheck to paycheck. Because to have a means to start a business, you have to be comfortable. So I'm not against conservative, I'm a very conservative mindset. We're economic migrants. My father came here in the 20s, 30s to start working here. Sorry, he was 30, came 40s, 50s, right? He came as an economic migrant. Most of our parents are very hardworking people. We're not trying to be state dependent. All we're saying is that we should be entitled to have the same equity between people. So everyone should have access to housing. Everyone should be able to focus on other things like business if we wanted to.
So what is the solution? What is your solution? What would you want to see?
I would like to see a government that's actually for its people. For example, the UK's national reading age is of a 9-year-old, which means most people that are voting have a mindset of a 9-year-old. They can't actually comprehend certain things, and that's because of also our lack of education. Most other European countries, even the US, it's of a 14, 15-year-old. So the fact that our education system is really low, there's even like skilled workers, we don't have many skilled workers. I've got people saying, oh, my grandkids can't get a job. I've been working since I've been 16. And I've been doing roles that people are probably doing in their 30s. Does that make sense? So it's all about, we have to go back to our education system. We have to go back to so many things and reform it so we can actually get the skilled workers we need instead of having to recruit them internationally.
I'd also say that it's imperative. So I'd actually disagree that it's an if you want situation with society looking after the underprivileged. I think that's abhorrent. I feel like our society benefits so much from having progressive values where the single mother of a child on the street, the homeless person, is looked upon with humanity. I think one of the biggest problems of the conservative, and I'd say neoliberal, because a lot of the Labour Party has the same mindset, is we've reduced people to be indispensable. We look upon human life like it's a product or a commodity, that something can be discarded. That's why we have a system where we have food banks and people suffering. And I'd say that with the duty and the obligation, it goes beyond the state. The state obviously has to do things. That's the basis of the social contract that we have. But businesses, the reason that you pay your tax, the reason that you do your CSR, your corporate social responsibility, the reason that you give back to the community is because you benefit from the community, you benefit from the collective. When you're hiring someone, you're hiring someone that's been state educated often, that's breathing clean air, hopefully, because of state regulations, that's been able to get to this age because of security provided by police, and all of this is collectively provided. This is all from us, all of us. We are a society, and I disagree fundamentally with the idea that if you want, give money to the poor. If you want, all of this is an obligation that we all benefit from? Because one day it might be you downtrodden and you'd be looking for someone to help you up. Or do we want a society where people are left to the wolves?
Right, okay, I've got a tweet. So, Labour hate the UK and its British people. They will only look after so-called ethnic minorities. About this one, I don't think Labour hate the UK and British people, and I don't think they only look after ethnic minorities, but I do think there is a level of pandering to some extent. You know, we'll take down the statues and we'll kneel for you. That's great, but that does nothing for me personally. It does nothing for anyone. I don't know if any black person here, if their lives have been improved because Keir Starmer kneeled last year.
No, it's true. I need money, big man. I don't care about
do you know what I mean?
Reparations.
He's not calling them names or having prejudiced ideas against them. At least he's making them feel part of society because they are a minority, right?
How's that him making us feel part of society?
Do you think being in a minority means to not be a part of society?
Yes.
No, yes, because
for me,
even the fact that they will take our passports from us because if we're a criminal and send us back to a country we've never been to, it shows that we're not a part of society. How can we be born and bred in this country, pay our taxes, and then be dismissed?
Okay, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with people who were born here and are then being sent to where their parents were born. I don't agree with that. But the people who have moved here from other countries, here like committing crimes in this country, I don't see nothing wrong with them being deported back after they've like raped, killed, been paedophiles. Like I'm not going to shed a single tear for a murderer or for a paedophile. But if they commit, I'm not going to.
It does feel like it's more to do with virtue signaling, where it's more to do with looking like you're doing the right thing as opposed to actually doing the right thing.
As opposed to doing anything.
I understand there's like that's the economic side of it and the political side of it. There's also a more of like a social and moral and ethical responsibility, as in what you believe to be right and wrong. And that manifests itself in the form of how we start a family, who we choose to have children with, things like that. There happens to be a lot of stuff in the black community that is detrimental for us. For example, we have one of the highest rates of single parenthood in the world in the black community.
But that's not because African and African culture dictates.
No, that's not what I'm getting at.
It's not black culture, that it's because of society. Because this country.
No, it's not because of society.
It is, because in the States, many single parents come from the fact that they took dad and put them in prison, and they created the system of being single parents.
The welfare
it's
state,
not because
the
black
welfare
culture
state
says
was introduced in the 60s in the States, which decentivized a lot of black men from being in the home. As a result of that, single mothers, they had this thing where it's almost as if the state replaced the black father in the household.
I think
it happened quite a lot.
You've come back to what the core issue was. It's the country. It was America and Britain, the way they've treated black men that have now made black men, a lot of men even run away from their kids because they fear that they might not be good fathers.
What?
This is the whole thing. No, but this is the thing. Can I just ask, at what point?
So now we're making excuses for people who have walked out on their families.
No, it's not excuses.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, I just want to say, right, I think ultimately, and I don't want to, like, I guess move the conversation, but I kind of will. Ultimately, right, there's always history and context to where people find themselves, right? The reason why, I guess, the single parenthood is so high in the UK is because there were a particular set of circumstances that we as a community didn't deal with properly, especially when we came here in the 90s and 80s. And there's a legacy of, even, I guess this conversation is centered around, like, Conservatives and Labour Party and voting and stuff. There's a reason why black people don't typically vote for the Conservative Party. Even though we have very conservative views and values, right? Like, ultimately, my mum came here, she's extremely hardworking, and she did have to rely on the state to a certain extent. However, she's always someone that's told me, you know, you shouldn't be on benefits and stuff like that. And the reason she doesn't vote Tory is because historically, the Tories weren't full minorities. It was the Labour Party that was. And I do agree with you to a certain extent that people on the left do virtual signal and do focus on things that are trivial and the majority of black people don't care about. Like, for example, I've never met a black person that says their biggest grievance in life is the fact that there's a statue of Churchill in Westminster. I don't think that's a big issue. However, the Labour Party is willing to do more for black people than the Conservative Party. That is a fact.
For example?
And also,
For example?
The Conservative Party...
No, tell me something Labour's going to do for black people.
So the Conservative Party argued against the Equality Act in 2010. right?
I mean
how on
now,
earth-
now.
You see, but this is what conservatives
now,
do.
though.
They always
But the thing is,
this
we're
is what,
living now,
this is
though.
What, wait, just really quickly, the conservatives always start from today, like history doesn't exist.
But you can't give me a
History is
policy
very
now.
important.
Okay,
but I
you
can
can't
give you-
say anything to me now.
I can give you, not necessarily.
No.
No. Like, I have a lot of
No, but I get that more.
I think you
I get
guys
that
are
more from the
probably,
left than I do from the
you know,
right.
all
Friends.
nice and chill.
Yeah, I have a lot of conservative friends, a lot of liberal. I like talking to people, right? Especially people that differ in views and opinions to me, right? So I have no problem with talking to someone. Obviously, it depends on how far their views are, right? Like, I'm not going to talk to any far-right activist or any racist, for example. And I don't think all conservatives are racist. I think there is an element of racism, you know, that's murking and bubbling under the surface that they need to deal with as a party. But I don't think the Conservatives as an entity is a racist party. But yeah.
I would, sorry.
For me? No, I think that we should all be willing to talk to each other about everything. You know, I'd never stop being friends with anyone if they told me that they're a Tory, or if they told me that they were Lib Dem or Green, or literally anything, to be honest. Like Labour, literally, if they said anything, I wouldn't mind, as long as it's not like, you know, let's kill people and like, as long as it's just like, we're like moderate in the conversation and everything, yeah, that's great. So I think we should be willing to do that and have that conversation. But what I find is a lot of people aren't willing to admit when their side is wrong or when their belief can be changed. Like, the thing is, I'm really open-minded and I'm open to hearing everything that people have to say in terms of if you present something to me, or Keir Starmer presents something now that makes it seem like he's worth voting for, I don't mind changing and voting for him. If the Green Party leader does something that, like, I'm like, oh, I like this manifesto, I'll vote for her. So I'm very much flexible in the sense of I listen and then I adapt. Whereas there's people who are so enshrined in their position that they won't move from it because they would rather die on the hill of being in their own little bubble than look into the real world. You can talk about Boris Johnson being a mess now. It's true. I agree with that. But you need to remember, he's democratically elected. We can talk about Corbyn in a past life that is never going to manifest into reality because he was not voted for. So this large majority of people that we're talking about, this silent majority who love Corbyn, were very much silent because he got the worst election result that the Labour Party have seen in a generation. So the truth of the matter is, it can be about whatever reason, but the truth is, a lot of people voted Conservative, a lot of people voted for Boris. Whether they will again, that's a whole other thing, I'm probably not.
A lot of people didn't.
But
A lot of people didn't. But
I just want to know if that's a real tweet, then that's a valid point, because there is an issue right now within the Labour Party supporters, people who have just gotten sick of the Labour Party over the last couple of years especially, and said things like, you know, Labour Party's a mess, anti-Semitism, racism, misogyny, and all these, you know, Diana, about everything like that within Labour. So what we need to ask ourselves, whichever party you're in actually, and it goes back to the PR point that was made earlier, what are you doing to make sure that people are not writing a tweet saying Labour hates the UK and only for minorities? Because it is up to Labour to direct that and make sure that they don't appear that way, and it's their job. That's why we, you know, elect them or don't elect them.
Yeah, because Labour also have a racism issue in terms of
misogyny.
like Jews and stuff, and a misogyny issue as well. I saw a lot of the inner hatred they've had of like Diane Abbott and Dawn Butler as well. Like I've saw that in David Lammy. Like I've watched that sort of unfold from Labour people online, and that was when I was a full-on like Labour supporter as well. And I watched it and I was mortified because not only did they not care, it wasn't even addressed in terms of like the things that got leaked and reported out. No one said anything in leadership in terms of even condemning it. So much as like not even implementing a policy to do something about it, but they didn't even condemn it openly. The things that was being said about Dawn Butler and stuff from the actual Labour people, it was absolutely insane. So it's like, you're willing to say all of this, oh yes, the Tories are racist. They very well might be, probably are, who knows, I don't know, right? But then there's this other opposing point from where you stand in which you have the same problem, but you're not willing to look in your own back garden, you're just willing to stay in that bubble of yours. So why don't we address a problem with racism in politics as a whole? That way we can tackle it together, as opposed to just being like, oh no, Labour's perfect, they care, they took the knee for me, Conservatives racist.
Yeah, that's
you know?
I would like to agree with the idea that, like, as I've been saying, a lot of these issues are universal to the entire British political landscape. Let's be honest, a lot of the people that represent British politics they're a lot of them are privately educated, they're straight, they're middle class, and they're not as representative of the everyday person in the UK as even a group of us. They're usually older. And I think, but to the point of whether I judge someone that would vote Conservative, I do. And the reason is I try and contextualize it. Obviously, I'm not a blind hater, but I feel like there's a degree to which if you've seen things like, and even if you voted Conservative in 2019, if you've seen things like the Windrush scandal unfold before your eyes, and you've watched Bojo or whichever prime minister it was, like send people that have lived here since their childhood, but back to Jamaica, to a home that they don't identify with. If you've seen like cuts to your own local schools, to your own like social landscape, if you've seen like, and if you've seen 150,000 people that died, like I lost someone during the pandemic, and this has all happened before your very eyes, and you think, you know what, yeah, the other guy would probably be worse, and that's your primary motivator to vote for a party that's probably presiding over the biggest transfer of wealth right now, right? But in terms of corruption, Corbyn would be proud. The wealth transfer is going upwards to Boris's mates. So it's just like, it's very much a big red flag. And I don't know, like, I can understand some of the reasons why someone might vote Tory, but that doesn't mean you have to be my friend and you can keep your distance.
I think they kind of view me as someone who's a bit weird, someone who might not know what they're talking about, because I do get a lot of condescension, sorry to say, from the left, where it's like, you know, there's this sort of, especially from a black perspective, there's this sort of like, almost like a sacred, sacrosanct idea as to what a black person is supposed to be, as in we're supposed to look a certain way, and most importantly, think a certain way. And if you come outside that box, usually it means to be left-wing or this, that, the other. And if you come outside that box, then somehow you're not black enough, basically. I've had people make fun of me because of the way that I speak, and then you look at the way they speak, it's like, what going blood? Like, really?
No, but they're proud.
And it's like, really? And it's like, there's this idea, and what you'll find is that, unfortunately, a lot of the things that many black people, not black people as a whole, just to be clear, but many black people have this, it's almost like an untouchable culture where we get a certain class of black people get to decide what black is and isn't. If you come outside that box, you're in serious trouble.
Yeah.
And that's
I would agree with you, man. And honestly, like anyone who says to someone you're not black enough because you have any sort of beliefs or views, I think that's completely wrong. And I think the only way we're going to make progress on racism, like you said, is for it to be cross-party, right? And for us to stop making it party political, because there is racism in the Tory party and it is racism in the Labour Party as well.
Yeah, so like, as I was, as just sort of building on that, it's just like, it's mainly coming from black people who support the Labour Party or on the left or are hard on the left, whatever, but they lean that way, who say things like that. So this idea, like, we can talk about party racism and all of that, but then there's also this sort of inward fighting that's coming, it's actually not even fighting so much, it's coming from one side onto the other, because I've let all the sort of black conservative people that I've met, they don't feel any type of way towards people who are on the left. Yep. They always listen to what they have to say. They don't say that you're not black enough, or the word coon is made for this type of people.
Or
the
Uncle
black
Tom.
conservative, the Uncle Tom.
Yep.
That it's made
Sell
for
out,
black
yeah.
conservatives. Sell out, all of this. You hate yourself. You need to look in yourself because you're, inner racist and all of this. Those words were made for black conservatives. We don't have any words for black people who are on the left. It doesn't exist.
No, there are
so
some.
it's. There isn't any though. There's not.
In America, there's a plantation.
Are we in America?
Well, I'm not American, and neither are you. I don't think, unless you are.
Do you think the way?
So that's American politics. American politics is very, very complex, very, very complex, and it's different, and it's way different to the political system here. And the American history of African Americans is totally different to the black British people here. So we need to talk about ourselves here and what we experience here.
Basically, I was just going to say that a lot of the people on the Labour side, the left side, always talk about the black experience, but what about our experience as to why we voted for Tories? Like, as a black person, we all have a voice, and you can't talk about, my voice is more important than your voice just because you voted for something. opposed to me now. It doesn't really make much sense, and I think there's a level of like hierarchy that people think in their minds that they think that, oh yeah, I'm better than you because I voted for Labour. It's like,
superiority.
yeah, it's like, it's a superiority complex. And I'm thinking to myself, what do you mean? Like, we're voting for...
I'm more equal than you.
We're in a society where we have no real democracy in a sense. We're either voting for left or right. We're either voting for Conservative or Labour. You know, that's the meaningful votes to go for. And suddenly now you have this superiority complex that, oh, suddenly your vote is the most important. It doesn't make much sense in my eyes, but yeah.
And the thing is, like, I voted for Labour, so I'm literally only 20. So the first time I got to vote was in the 2019 election, and was it 2019? Yeah, so that was the first time I was able to vote. And I voted for Jeremy Corbyn, because actually back then I was a full-on lefty, and I actually really liked him. Like when the last general election was.
2019.
Yeah, so I voted for Corbyn for my local MP, but I wanted Corbyn to be Prime Minister. And, you know, I really liked his policies and things like that. And it's only from, not exactly after he lost, I suddenly changed. It's actually over lockdown, I just started listening to other political opinions and then just started learning and being like, oh, well, I can't hate those on the right. It was this mentality of you have to hate the Conservative, they're all racist. I had to go out and learn for myself, figure out why, and that's why I
agree with you, that's
why I learned.
I agree with you, that's wrong.
So in terms of Black Conservatives, I feel like you're entitled to believe what you want to believe, but at the same time, there are Black people who politically are aligned with Blackness. So that is what you are pushing up against when they're telling you that sort of thing about your identity. And their politics is about community. Their politics is about uplifting and like moving as a unit. I think when I hear Black Conservatives, I hear a lot of kind of individualism and like these sort of Black capitalist ideas, which is about yourself and it's about selfishness. And that's why, like, was it the previous question? I'm not too sure about like, would I be friends with a conservative? It kind of makes me think, what do they believe? I wouldn't be friends with a conservative because a lot of the time they're demonizing the poor, they have questionable ideas around the refugee community, and they don't acknowledge the different struggles that people have.
What no sense?
So I personally studied politics. I did my A-levels in politics. I did my undergrad in international politics. I've done a lot of research into it, and it actually made me hate politics because I saw how much corruption, how much lies, and you know, I completely hated the whole concept. I wanted to run for mayor, not mayor, MP, and go into parliament properly. Even these conversations, a lot of it is ignorance, I believe, and why I say that is, I say it respectfully, in the sense that there's a lot of the political system that people might not know about. There's a lot of like the start of Labour, what the start of Labour was, what the start of Tories are. Coming back to like one of your points of, like I myself, I came from social housing, yeah? If it wasn't for the council housing my family, I would have been on the streets. I myself then educated myself to a very, you know, I did further education, I've got a high salary, I'm paying back my taxes, I'm living comfortable. I can't forget where I came from. So me now depriving the future generations who might be impacted, I feel like that's unfair because if I didn't have that, where would I be? So coming back to like, what politics, what can be done in politics. I think a lot of education, like it should be a compulsory subject. It should be a compulsory subject from school days. I think even in primary school, that because it's a big deal. We should know when we're voting, especially at 18, we should know what we're voting for and what it actually means to vote.
Yeah, so in terms of making politics more accessible, specifically, I would say with the Black community, I think one thing we definitely need to do is we need to stop tying Blackness to a political ideology. We should stop saying that Black people need to be left-wing. Even though like I subscribe and I'm more progressive, it doesn't necessarily mean that other Black people have to be like me and that you're a sellout if you're not, or you don't care about the Black community because you don't vote Labour. Like I've met some conservatives, some Black conservatives that care passionately about the Black community and they're doing work in their local community as well, more work than some of these virtual signaling people on the left. So I think, honestly, like we really need to take colour and I guess we need to stop tying Blackness to this socialist ideology because socialism and Blackness are you know, it's an oxymoron when you actually think about it because if you understand the roots of socialism, you know, you would understand that like there were racist components in socialism when it was incepted as well. So we can't say that socialism is a pure ideology that has no racism at all. But yeah, to make politics more accessible, let's take the identity out of it to a certain extent. because I do think class is very important. And let's basically say to people, you can be black and a Tory and still have a valid opinion.
Yeah, just sort of building on that, I agree. So I do think that we should be doing more to just open up the conversation. And the truth is, in making it more accessible, I think that we live in an age where, you know, for a lot of people, I'm not saying this is for everyone, but for a lot of people, the internet is available, computers at school are available, and that type of thing, and educating yourself and learning. If the school won't teach you, you know, if you're interested enough, you'll go out of your way to learn more. I'm sure a lot of people here have said things that they've went out and researched themselves as opposed to someone sitting down and teaching them it. So, you know, we do live in an age where information is accessible to influence your decision. But I don't think that you should be, if you're black, you should vote Tory, or if you're black, you should vote Labour. I think that people should just look at the political climate, look at what whoever's in charge is doing now, see if they'd want that again, or if not, see if there's other options available, and go with what makes sense to them as opposed to just binding to one party. You have to just constantly adapt to what fits and benefits you and your family and that type of thing.
Okay, I'll say mainly there are two reasons, two things we can do. One is there's got to be more of a social responsibility where, okay, you can put politics in schools, but also do it at home with your own children. Don't wait for the public education to do it for you. Introduce certain ideas about like left and right and these kind of things, values and stuff from the child from they're like a young age, and help them to have a more clear understanding as they grow older, so that they're not thrust into this world where I'm 18 now, suddenly I can vote. Who do I vote for? And you have people on the left and right that exploit these people because they don't know what the hell they're doing. Another thing I would say is that there needs to be a lot more respectful discourse from both sides, because I noticed that, you know, what you said earlier about tying blackness to a certain political ideology, that's part of it as well. But there's also a lot of gaslighting that I get where people say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about because you did this. And there's like a lot of condescension. Like, you know, when people say, for example, like, you don't know what you don't know what you're voting for because you voted for Brexit, or you voted for this, that, the other. And therefore you're effectively a stupid person. Well, no, everyone has their own unique perspective. So that's what I'll say. Be social responsibility and more pleasant public discourse.
Yeah, I think there should be a body, a sort of cross-party body, like organisation, just for sort of young people from different political viewpoints to come together and make legislation. There already is like things like Young Labour and Young Conservatives, but that's just breeding like the next generation of, you know, separatists. And as we've been saying here, cross-party discussion of things like racism, misogyny in particular, needs to be done across party level, and who better to do it than the next generation who will be leading the way. So that's what I think we should have to make it more accessible to young people from all different political backgrounds, definitely.
I have a similar, I study politics as well at university, and I found that a lot of the kids on my course, which was predominantly white and middle class, they didn't know more about politics than a lot of the kids I'd had conversations with back in Barking, where I come from. Like, it's just they had more of the vernacular and the accent that made it sound like they knew more about what they were talking about. I would suggest that kids from working class backgrounds and diverse backgrounds need to be encouraged to see themselves in these spaces, whether it's in parliament or wherever it might be, or local councils, because our voice is just as valid. And the second point I'd say is that we need more democracy across the board, whether it's like local energy companies, whether it's like more growth of trade unions, whether it's like places where people can organize collectively and form social unions and stuff. I think that's important. People need to be making more decisions and having more direct democracy in their own lives to understand the value of their vote and politics.
I think overall they intentionally make politics inaccessible. So I feel like we should also focus on grassroots activism as well. So like there's different ways to make changes, and alongside the sort of organised politics, having that grassroots politics, they're able to sort of push the politician's hand and make changes that without the activists doing all the heavy lifting wouldn't happen. So I think we should also look at that side of politics as well.
I'll just say, just at the discourse, I think there needs to be more discourse between just everyone, just to get more of an understanding.